Welcome back to the Pilot's Lounge. On today's episode, we are joined by United States Navy pilot, Lieutenant Casper O'Brien. Casey flies MH-60 Sierras and is also qualified in the MQ-8 Charlie, but most people probably know him from Instagram as he runs and is the mind behind the Haze Gray Helo page. If you're on Instagram, be sure to go check out @Haze Gray Helo. He shares some amazing videos on that page, so be sure you drop him a follow and share some of his content. Casey brings us his story, growing up a little bit all over the world and what led him actually to become a Navy rescue swimmer prior to entering into flight school and becoming the weapons and tactics instructor that he has developed into today. From wherever you are listening, sit back, grab your cup of coffee, and thanks again for joining us on the Pilot's Lounge.
What's going on, Brotallion? This is John Gray, host of the Hangar Z podcast. We love the Pilot's Lounge podcast and know you do as well. Hey, when you're done here, come check out the Hangar Z podcast. We're the first and only podcast promoting the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. You can find us at hangarzpodcast.com or anywhere where you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back to the Pilot's Lounge. Today we are joined by Lieutenant Casper O'Brien, who is a Navy MH-60 Sierra pilot and weapons and tactics instructor. Comes to us with a huge breadth of experience from being a rescue swimmer, spending time pretty much all around the world. Arizona State University graduate. Casey, welcome. Thanks for joining us on the Pilot's Lounge today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
So to give people some background about kind of what brought Casey to us, kind of putting a name with, I'll say a handle. Casey, for a lot of people, is known on Instagram as Haze Gray Helo and posts some incredible content. And before we dive into that, kind of what got you into that side of things? Is that like kind of been a hobby? Do you film your own content? Like how do you kind of, what made you pursue kind of sharing sort of your story through the platform in that manner?
Man, I don't know. It definitely started as a hobby. I really enjoy what I do. I mean, what we do. Flying is, it's a treat. Like, we get to do something for a living that people, do for a hobby. They pay money to do what we do and we're getting paid to do it. So it's fantastic. I have a lot of fun and just sharing that story with other people and, some of the creativity that comes out in some of the edits. No, I've just been having a lot of fun with it. And I just wanted to share some of the stuff that I've been working on.
Yeah, those edits, man, they're pretty clean. That's not easy stuff, and it takes a lot of time. And I, from personal experience, it's not easy. And to have that, have the image that you want and project it on whatever your CapCut or whatever you're using over there. I'm sure it's probably more advanced than that for what you do, but it's impressive, and it's awesome to see. And hopefully the Instagram algorithm starts favoring that type of content. Reels are big, but I feel like sometimes there's not a lot we can do. But
yeah, my wife agrees with you. It takes a lot of time.
Yep, so does mine.
Yeah, but I think interestingly enough, though, similar to our podcast, I think that the content, even though it is hard on the discovery side, I think it reaches, especially through communities like
absolutely
not just Brotallion, but all the different things. I mean, your stuff is shared across all of the platforms, which are not all the platforms, but like all the different big pages, which I think says a lot because it's still reaching that target audience of people who like the kind of content that you post, which is pretty cool. And like, no shit, if you haven't seen his videos, seriously, go check out Haze Gray Helo. There is some incredible stuff on there, and it's really cool. So I'll have to pick your brain a separate time on kind of that realm of the hobby and editing and all that, because that's a realm that I want to educate myself more on while we do some stuff with Brotallion, but that's super cool. One of the things that we typically do on the podcast, I know you've listened to some of the episodes, is table talk. We'll try to warm up. We'll try to take it easy-ish on you. You are a Navy pilot. We know you can handle whatever we throw at you because you are a naval aviator. So with that being said, I know Brett and Spence and myself probably all have some questions lined up. So Brett, you can kick it off.
Yeah, sure. This is kind of an oldie but goodie question that I used to go to, but you were born in 1987?
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple awesome movies came out in 1987, and just let me know your favorite and why. I'll list off my 3 favorites, and you let me know your favorite. Spaceballs, Predator, or Wall Street?
Spaceballs.
We've been jammed.
No, that's a good list right there. Yeah.
As an AMSO, I will say, and Spence, if you do go to the AMSO course, there are several Spaceballs little video clips that are very relatable to things. And it's just like, oh, specifically the "we've been jammed" part. That every
Very
time
nice.
I see that, it's just like, oh, that is actually that specific clip is the opener to our D3 SOE class. So it's pretty cool.
Go comb the desert.
Yeah, go comb the desert.
I don't think that I've seen Spaceballs in like 20 years, or I'm overdue for a rewatch.
All 3 of those are good. It just comes down to the genre that you're more into.
Yeah, dude. Wall Street is a fucking low key banger, man. That'd be even Predator too. I mean, I digress. Case, you went to Arizona State, correct?
I did. Yeah.
Is it true that 1 in every 4 students has an STD there?
Oh man. Well, I can attest to myself. I do not. So I guess I'm good.
The
Is it-
minority.
okay, wait, is it a-
Congratulations on.
Is it a you do? Well, never mind. You're married. I'm not gonna do a follow up question on that one. But my typical one, the follow up question would be: is it you do not anymore, or blank? You do not?
I get. Maybe I was
Hey,
one of the
you can
lucky
be in the
ones. I
Army.
don't know.
That's true.
You
That's
can
true.
be in the
It's
Army
been-
now with HIV, so no big
Oh
deal.
wow. Is that for real?
Did that like come out in a memo? I don't feel like that's
Yeah,
a widely
I'm pretty
known
sure
thing.
it's a thing. Yeah, I
Don't
thought
they
I
test
saw
for
it.
that like every year.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm pretty sure you're still. I think you can be in the army, but I don't think you can be deployable with HIV. Like I don't think there are
Interesting.
countries that will allow you inside of them with HIV. And there's people who won't let you inside of them. Never mind. That's again. There's a whole
What?
list of. I mean, there's just it's a thing. Like that's a weird. I haven't heard that, but now I'm probably gonna look it up at a later date. Okay, so there's a little.
You
it's
don't
a
have to
two-part-
graduate from high school anymore either. I don't think with these recruiting numbers.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think. I think you ever technically. Yeah, you could have a GED or a letter from. I don't know. There. Yeah, that's a rabbit
A
hole.
letter from your mom.
Yeah, a letter from your mom. Okay, so first part of this question is obviously have you saw the new Top Gun,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You can
How
buy it
many-
on Amazon today, by the way. It came out
I
today.
saw
I'm
that.
sorry for interrupting. I'm done. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, I saw that. There's a little plug for all the people who are already making millions off their production. We'll throw that out there too. How many times did you call bullshit during Top Gun?
You know, that's actually a really good question. Because those movies where you're like, no, that's not real. We wouldn't do that. Like, I mean, I'm not an F-18 pilot, but the brevity, some of the things they did, there was a lot of legitimacy to it. Not that many times to answer your question. It was
The
pretty
call
well
signs are
made.
whack, though.
Yeah, the call signs are pretty
The
dumb.
call signs are whack.
Overall acting, I'm gonna give like on a normal grading scale, I'll give overall acting a solid like C plus, I would say. But they definitely spent their budget on the scenes, on the flying scenes, and not the actors outside of Miles Teller. They blew their whole budget on Miles Teller and
Yeah,
Tom Cruise.
yeah.
But I'm sorry, TC.
TC.
Jesus.
TC, yep.
TC. No, so it's funny that you say that because brevity, yes, they tried. They did try more so than most movies, and I know you can appreciate that as a weapons and tactics instructor. They did try. The thing that I laughed probably the most about that I'm sure you can appreciate was their briefing of like the SA threats. I was sitting there looking, I was like, yes, this is definitely this is what it looks like when we brief a mission is this whole 3D graphical representation that
Oh,
flies
I
the
wish.
aircraft through with these arbitrary, I don't even know what kind of missiles those actually were. Not a real thing. Not going to dive down that road, but no, I was curious because Justin, I don't think had the same experience. Justin did not seem overly impressed by the movie. He was also hammered during it, but he was not all that impressed. I don't believe, but no, that's the first one.
Well, hey, everyone's a critic. That one maneuver, I don't even know what it was, where he tipped in on whatever fighter, Gen 5 fighter that was a hell of a maneuver,
The fact,
which I don't think can be done.
I don't think it can be, but I will give it to him. Probably the biggest thing was the fact
I got
that
a great Polaroid of it. It was
right
there.
But to your point, in terms of brevity and just general, like making some effort, the fact that they included Gen 5, like just the term Gen 5 fighter, I was like, interesting. Somebody at least did a little bit of effort in there.
It's pretty,
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting in that movie though. Like they wouldn't give a clear adversary. Like in the first movie, right? It was Russia. Like there were Russia markings on everything. But in this one, it's like trying to make as much money as we can. We're gonna tiptoe around
It's
and
Russia.
not just
Fucking Denovians.
Yeah, it was also
either Russia
interesting
or China.
timing. Yeah, I mean, the movie was supposed to be released, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But on the same hand too, though, I think obviously the first one was made Cold War era, just following and still when the Soviet Union was present and flourishing, not flourishing. That's not the word I want to use for that. Still very much a thing. Whereas now I feel like modern day to not escalate. Like, okay, for instance,
we're in a Cold War for sure.
We are in a Cold War. But for instance, what was that movie? The Interview, where they just like blatantly went all out on North Korea and didn't like, they gave zero fucks about anything politics related. And they're like, we are going to go hard on just demolishing North Korea's just morale. And that's basically what the whole movie was about. And like they literally didn't air it in theaters because North Korea threatened to launch missiles if we aired it in US theaters. So when you think about it in that perspective, they're like, okay, well, let's not step on toes and just blanket put a country on it because of, whatever political climate, whatever. But no, I agree with that. Follow-up question, totally unrelated. You were at Arizona State University. What was your favorite, just to verify, you did go to like the Tucson campus, right?
Man, no, that was a dagger to my heart. That's University of Arizona, our rival. It was the Tempe, Arizona. Is Arizona State.
I was wrong.
Nick, you're 0 for 2 right now.
I'm 0
For
for
those
2.
that
I'm
didn't get to
0
hear
for
the
2.
original intro, he introed Casey as a Marine Corps pilot when he's actually a naval
I
aviator.
did. But you know what's great is I'm going to edit saying that out. I'm going to edit the first part out. Nothing's going to matter. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. Okay. Well, in my defense, Arizona State University, like I feel like if you don't go to one of those, you're going to get them mixed up all the time. Okay. Well, in that case, Tempe, what's your favorite dive bar there?
Oh man. I mean, at this point, well, Mill Avenue is the main drag with all the bars on it, and it is just transformed since I graduated in 2009. But Q Club was the spot. What was it, like $3 Long Islands until 10 o'clock? Yeah, that was the spot to be.
So Nick kind of stole. I like to ask people their favorite dive bar, mainly selfishly because I'm compiling a list of like cool dive bars to go visit if I'm ever in a state. So outside of Arizona State, you've done a lot of traveling, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later when we get into the meat and potatoes of the podcast. But anywhere outside of Tempe, Arizona, throughout the world, what is the coolest or your favorite dive bar that you've had a few adult beverages in?
Well, it kind of depends on the mood you're looking for, but had a lot of fun in Nashville. Tootsie's Lounge there is a lot of fun. But one memory Tootsie's that I'm surprised that I remember was a port call in Lisbon, Portugal, and it was just a guy up there with his guitar, and he had it wasn't a big bar, it was just a strip, but he had the whole place just jumping. It was a great time. I wish I could remember the name of it. I'd tell you, but it was a good time.
Okay, I'm just going to fly to Lisbon, Portugal, and work my way through all the bars so we can ID which one that is.
For anybody interested, we're going to have the next Brotallion Blue Skies Foundation auction in Lisbon, Portugal. So have fun buying your tickets. I would recommend getting them early.
It will not disappoint.
No, so I've actually heard great things about Lisbon. I didn't ever get to go there, but I knew some people who, when they were over in Europe for a different thing, they actually did some exercises down in Lisbon, and they had a great time, so I actually know people who've just traveled there too, just to go to Portugal. So It's pretty cool. Moving on from that a little bit, kind of talking a little bit, that's actually a good segue into kind of your growing up and kind of your background and what eventually took you over to decide to want to join the military and do what you're doing now. Obviously, I know you lived in Tempe, Arizona when you were younger before you went back for college, but then there was that block of time where you kind of were all over the world between Singapore and Bangkok, Thailand. I know you were pretty young, but do you have pretty good recollection of like your experiences in those places and living and how that kind of developed you as a young man kind of moving forward in life? Did it give you a different perspective?
Yeah, I think it definitely did. Very fortunate to be able to grow up overseas, be able to travel. Yeah, I understand that not everyone gets that opportunity, and my wife reminds me of that all the time. She's very frustrated every time I say, "Yeah, I've been there before." But yeah, my parents got the opportunity to take us overseas, experience many different cultures. Um, it was great. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Singapore was our first stop. I spent fourth to eighth grade in Singapore, and it's true. It's one of the safest countries in the world. So my parents were very comfortable just saying go. I skateboarded at the time. I was taking the subway, taxis to the skate park.
You kind of do have very like a Tony Hawk-esque appearance to you. I can see it.
Well, I don't know about that, but the point being, I had independence at a very young age, and I think that formulated a lot of how I am now. Yeah, it was great, and there's the one drawback to growing up overseas is you don't necessarily have a good foundation. You don't have those deep roots and those long-term friends. I still keep in touch with some of my friends, even as far back as my Singapore days. But you don't have those lifelong friends that someone from maybe a small town or, if you stayed in a town from kindergarten to senior year of high school and so on. So that's something that, is kind of a void, but I've always come back to Arizona and called that home.
Would you attribute a lot of your travels to a greater appreciation for what we have here in America?
No, definitely the conveniences, the freedoms. You realize that when you go overseas, the gap in the economic classes. Yeah, definitely.
So kind of looking at between those two, actually, my main question before I kind of go into that, have you been back to Singapore or Thailand since then with the Navy?
I have, and it was definitely a different experience. Pulled into Singapore.
The old 4 floors.
Yeah, did
What?
not know that existed when I was young. I'll tell you that. So that
I
was
actually don't know what that
eye-opening.
is. Somebody please explain that to me.
We won't talk about it on air. We'll talk about it afterwards.
No. I think okay. That's fine. We'll keep it PG-13.
But yeah, I was able to go back to the house I lived in, and it was great. Everything just looked different, more built up, more established. It was really cool to walk down that memory lane. And then I went back to Thailand with my wife. I forget how long ago. We went to like Krabi, Phuket, like the southern beaches, everything you see on the postcards and the pictures. And then I wanted to spend a couple of days in Bangkok to kind of relive some of those high school memories. So went by our house there, and yeah, it hadn't changed a bit. It was really cool to go back there.
Now, so kind of moving, like obviously I'm looking at your timeline right now that you kind of gave us just because, and it is, I'm looking at it, I'm like, Arizona, Singapore, Bangkok, Arizona, and kind of the progression there. So when did you know, like through your experiences, obviously your parents were teachers, you're the middle child. What kind of drove you to want to go the military route? Like, did you grow up doing ROTC? Did you get into it in college? Did you just say, hey, were you just drawn to serve? Like kind of what spawned that interest?
So living overseas, you don't have like ROTC, anything like that. I was obviously still proud to be an American, and getting back to Arizona, I was just focused on going to school, doing well. My parents went to Arizona State, sister went to Arizona State, so it was a no-brainer. I was like, well, I'll just continue what the family does, and I'm going to go to Arizona State. But yeah, 2008 happened, market crashed, economy crashed. The first thing that companies did was offload marketing consultants, and that essentially is what I went to school for. Admittedly, I didn't try terribly hard to find a job. After I graduated, I had a sports marketing thing and sales going on, and a couple of other odd jobs until I kind of got my feet under me. And a childhood dream of mine was always to serve. Like my dad served during Vietnam. Come from a long line of Navy guys, grandpa, uncle, and then my uncle also served in the Army. So all of us kind of had that sense of service to our country, and it was definitely in the blood. But upbringing, early years, not necessarily. It all kind of came to a head, and I took the economy crashing as kind of a sign, and I pursued my childhood dream to fly. And the funny story behind that was originally I was going to join the Air Force. And then I went to sign the contract, and they had some sort of hiring freeze, and they didn't know when they'd be able to bring anybody on. So I went next door to the Navy, and I told them, well, I was going to try and be a pararescueman for the Air Force. What does the Navy have? Oh, you want to be a Navy SEAL? I said I did not want to be a Navy SEAL. So the next best thing that they had to offer was a rescue swimmer spot. And I had already had my degree. So I joke saying the recruiter got one up on me, but I wouldn't change a thing. I've had a blast through the journey.
So kind of looking at, I'll admit the extent of my knowledge of a rescue swimmer pretty much comes from the movie The Guardian, which is obviously Coast Guard oriented.
Great movie.
It's a phenomenal movie. I've never met a Coast Guard rescue swimmer, so I can't really verify the validity of it. But that is like, when I think a school rescue swimmer, that's kind of like the breadth of knowledge that I have. Can you talk a little bit about that? Only because the rescue swimmer pipeline does still seem like a pretty difficult pipeline. And I'm sure that somebody out there is going to be like, oh, well, what does that entail? So could you kind of talk to us a little bit about what all that school is like in terms of, physical requirements, kind of the stuff that they take you through, and just the overall training pipeline?
Yeah, absolutely. So every enlisted guy is going to start out in boot camp in Great Lakes. I believe it's 2 months. Even being a rescue swimmer, you're set aside going through a division with all the other NSW guys. Rescue swimmer isn't necessarily considered naval special warfare, but the physical requirements are close enough that they wanted to start the shaping in boot camp. After boot camp, you'll go down to Pensacola, where all of naval aviation schools are. You're going to start out at Aircrew Candidate School. Definitely a lot of physical training down there, and on some of the survival swimming qualifications as well. And then after Aircrew Candidate School, you're going to go to Rescue Swimmer School. That's where everything's really ramped up. They get you in the pool. You're doing underwater sprints, making sure that you are comfortable in the water. And, when you're in those bad situations, those difficult situations, that you're able to handle the stress and take care of whatever it is that you need to take care of. I had a blast at Rescue Swimmer School. It was very challenging. It pushes you. I looked around as a 23-year-old and noticed that everyone was 18, 19 around me. And I was just blown away by their maturity. I don't think I could do that at 18 years old. But I also said the same thing when I got to flight school. I was 27 looking around, everyone's 23, 24. And I was like, there's no way I could do this as a 23-year-old. I was too worried about, where I was going on a Thursday, Friday night, and, where I was getting brunch the next day. So I've been blown away by some of the other guys around me through every pipeline. But after rescue swimmer school, you actually go to A school, all in Pensacola. That's where you actually start to learn some of what the helicopter does. A lot of oceanography, for the Romeo guys. The Navy flies the MH-60 Sierra, which is more the utility helicopter. And then the Romeo is going to be your anti-submarine warfare helicopter. So the sonars, the dipping buoys and all that stuff. I always wanted to be the Sierra side, the utility kind of, the Swiss Army knife. And I was fortunate enough to make that happen. Funny story about that. When we got to A school, they're like, oh, okay, you're either going to be in Jacksonville, San Diego, or Norfolk. So being from Arizona, I want to be in San Diego. Okay, so what platform do you want to be? I want to be a Sierra crewman. Okay, well, you got to get top of your class if you want to, go where you want to go. So I worked my butt off, and then come to the end of the class, they're like, okay, you're going to go Sierra Norfolk. And I asked, okay, well, I got top of the class. Why am I not getting my first choice? And they said, oh, the detailer needed inputs in the middle of the course. So we just did A through M, went to San Diego, N through Z, went to Norfolk. It's like, all right, this is my first taste of the Navy detailing. So went on from there. But Norfolk was great. It was far from home. Didn't necessarily enjoy it too much. But, the East Coast has its pros. I'm just a West Coast guy. I enjoy being closer to Arizona, and San Diego is fantastic. 75 all year long. Yeah, I've really enjoyed the journey, especially the rescue swimmer stuff. It was a blast.
Yeah, the East Coast is definitely it is different. I grew up in the Midwest. I was at Bragg. We flipped to Norfolk a lot, and I think in general, to that point, I think there's a lot of sense of not security, but just of comfort and enjoyment when you're just a little bit closer to home. It makes life easier. It's a difference in a 9-hour plane ride and an hour drive. Little bit easy on that side. Something I kind of want to go back to that you brought up kind of before. I think both Spence and Brett look like they have some more to add, but specific to when you were talking about boot camp, you were saying that they kind of, and I could have misinterpreted it, but with the Navy, do they kind of look at your projected career field and say, okay, that is your physical expectation for that career field? To go that route, you need to have this standard, and you need to be meeting this standard, or you're going to get reclassed or pushed out.
Yeah, so you're actually contracted as either SO, special operator, team guy, EOD, what have you, SWIC, or rescue swimmer. So that's why they put you all in that division together. So the expectation is that you are, higher than the physical standard of everyone else. And it does help prepare you for the next step. One thing the Navy is really good about, and I'm sure the Army is the same, is the crawl, walk, run mentality. Oh, you're shaking your head. Maybe not. But yeah, it was, palatable. And I was able to kind of ease into everything. I mean, I wasn't the most physically fit guy, but, a lot of it had to do with mental toughness as well. So you just make it happen. You'd be surprised, like even some of the best swimmers, just that type of activity in the water, they were just not comfortable.
Well, I mean, you did mention underwater sprints, which I don't exactly know what that is, but it sounds completely miserable. Is that like weighted running underwater? Is it like swimming really fast underwater? What exactly is an underwater sprint? Just to clarify that.
So yeah, it's all underwater, and just doing one length of the pool doesn't sound terrible, but then they're not going to let you hold on to the side of the pool, so you're treading water. Granted, you do have fins on, but that adds a whole nother difficulty and dynamic to swimming, the rigidity of the fins and everything. But yeah, you're treading water, and that whistle is just going to go in a couple seconds again, and you're going to do another underwater sprint. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's swimming as fast as you can underwater with the single breath.
That sounds pretty not miserable, but that doesn't sound fun. I will say it doesn't sound fun. Before we dive into kind of your transition over, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. I just wanted to to ask a question about your time before you kind of came in. I know we're backtracking a little bit, try to stay on course here, but between 2009 and 10, you said you had a couple odd jobs in there, and I always find odd jobs as, you know, I've had a few, especially coming off active duty, done a few different things, and I just was curious on what were some of the wonky odd jobs you did before you joined up.
So if you ever, I don't know if you've seen any of these, for lack of a better term, scams, but like own your own business quick type thing, right? So when I say sports marketing, that almost embellishes what I was doing, but essentially, you know, I interviewed for this job, and they're like, "Oh, you'll be great for this. You're going to be selling, you know, Phoenix Coyote tickets." I was like, "Okay, not my favorite team, but I'll press." And then they're like, "Okay, the uniform, you know, you got to dress up nice. You got to play the part." It's like, "Okay, I can do this." And then when I started getting some of the on-job training, it was, you know, essentially cold calling people. You're walking up to people at Home Depot, Lowe's, asking if they want season tickets or some sort of package deal to the Phoenix Coyotes. I don't know if you guys are hockey fans, but they're not stellar, and they never have been. So that was a very difficult thing to do. But we also did, you know, Arizona Diamondbacks and all the other Arizona teams. It was very difficult. Yeah, that really, it was an interesting job, and it did not last very long.
Yeah, man, sales is, I took a sales course, and I applied for a couple of sales jobs, and I'm just so happy that I didn't get anywhere with it.
Yeah.
That shit's not easy, and you got to have the personality for it. I don't know, especially the high pressure stuff that it kind of seemed like you were doing like that. That's not easy, man.
So kind of, I appreciate that. Spencer, do you have anything before we kind of move on to the next segment?
No, I was just curious if you had any unique experiences or stories that you wanted to share as a rescue swimmer before we sort of transition into your career in aviation. That's not every day that we get somebody with that background on the podcast, so I'm anxious to hear if no, then that's cool. We can move forward, and you know, Nick can cut me out. But I feel like there's probably at least one or two things you did that was pretty badass, or perhaps you looked back on and was like, God damn, I'm fortunate to have gotten out of that situation.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some things that I can't talk about or I shouldn't talk about, so I'll omit those. I don't know. Like, I think the coolest thing about moving essentially from the back seat of the aircraft to the front seat and staying in the exact same community, granted I'm on a different coast than I was before, the people kind of come back around, and the same people that taught me as a E3, E4, who are now E7s. Now on the other side, like we're in the same command, but I still have that camaraderie and that connection with that person. I think that's really one of the coolest things. And then, like, granted, I wasn't an air crewman with thousands of hours. I left being an AW, which is the rescue swimmer air crewman, with 800 hours, just long enough to deploy a few times and get fully qualified. But you know, it was the impact that some of those guys made on me was fantastic, and it's really cool to see them come back around and, you know, be their division officer or be their department head. Yeah, I owe a lot to them, and it's been really great serving with them in a different capacity. It's been really cool.
So kind of talking a little bit about, obviously, you know, 2014, you're in Pensacola, but prior to that, what was like that clicking moment that you said, you know what, I'm going aviation? How does that really work for you guys? Like in the Army, they've got like green to gold. There's all kinds of different programs out there for enlisted officer transitions. How did that work for you going from being a rescue swimmer over to becoming a pilot?
So when I was on deployment to Naples, Italy, I forget which year specifically, but it was a single aircraft deployment. And if the Admiral ship wasn't underway, then we weren't underway. And then if the aircraft was in maintenance, we didn't necessarily fly. So I had a lot of free time, worked out a lot, got to travel a lot. It was a blast. So the point I'm trying to get to is I had a lot of time to put together an OCS package, but the kind of aha moment, I don't know, it probably happened on an FCF, a functional check flight, in your 100th hour of a ground turn. And I'm looking up and probably the co-pilot says something stupid. And I was like, I know the answer to that. And it just clicks. I was like, I know what they know. Like, they can't do what I do, but I just need to go learn the monkey skills and I can do what they do. Like this, it can't be that hard. So essentially, like, I know what you know. I'm going to go learn what you do. And the rest was really history.
So is that just like a basic packet to put in since you already had your degree? You just pretty much applied directly to transition to becoming an officer and going to flight school. How did that specific part work? Was it just like as simple as a packet and a board or what?
So yeah, the instruction is the 1420. I forgot the exact name for it, but yeah, 1420 literally walks you through the application step by step. It's super simple. My career counselor, so the Navy has NC's career counselors in each command. He just wasn't fantastic. That's not to say that every career counselor is terrible, but he just wasn't helpful. So I kind of took it on myself, and I had the right chain of command in place. My leading petty officer on deployment was fantastic. A good buddy of mine. He happened to be my first salute as well. And then my officer in charge was fantastic too. And one thing he said to me that I still use to this day is, your goals are my goals. So I want to make sure you succeed. And he, it rung true. Like his actions, followed that saying, and they helped me out, got great letters of recommendation, put me in front of the right people. And I had a lot of time to put together that package, and I submitted it. And everyone's like, if you don't get picked up the first time, just be ready to resubmit it. Make a couple tweaks. I was like, okay, no big deal. And I got picked up right away, and I was gone like 2 months later. Newport, Rhode Island is where officer candidate school is for the Navy.
That's a really fast process in comparison to the Army, or I can't speak for other branches, but I know at least for the Army, that is a very fast process. So good on them for acknowledging that where the talent is, getting those packets processed, and, getting people where they want to go, provided, they're qualified or selected and everything. So kind of looking at, cool, you're at flight school. We don't have to dive into the ins and outs of flight school. I think pretty much every guest that's been on, we've talked about what Navy or Air Force or Army flight school looks like. But what was, given your background, kind of obviously leads to why you wanted to choose, the MH-60 Sierra, but how overall, just kind of in a generalization, was that experience for you? Was there ever a point in flight school where you're like, man, you know what, maybe I want to go fly fast movers because that's a pretty cool job too? Were you open to that, or were you pretty much set on going the rotary wing route?
Yeah. Every instructor, every piece of advice I received is, they're like, hey, go in with an open mind, talk to the instructors, see, the community that you fit in best with, the personalities and everything like that. It was kind of like the easy road. Be like, I know what I'm getting myself into. I know the community. I know the pilots. I know the AWs. I definitely went in with an open mind. One thing that's unique about the Marines, Navy, and Coast Guard, we learned to fly in fixed wing first, the T6. And you're able to pull, not a ton of G's, but enough for me to know I didn't want to pull G's for the rest of my career. So I think probably around aerobatics phase, that's when I knew, yep, helicopters is where I belong. I like to see the ground. I like to be low. I like to be slow. And pulling G's just wasn't for me.
And I think that's something that, especially myself, like I've flown small fixed wing, aircraft, like general aviation aircraft. But when you start talking about, high performance jets or even the T6, when you start talking about that stuff, I think it's a totally different physiological thing to where you could say, oh, I want to do that. But until you've experienced that, which like I definitely haven't. So like hindsight 2020, I could be like, oh, that'd be cool to do it. But I've never done anything close to that. So I could get in there and be like, yeah, hard pass. Because we all say that, specifically we were down in Tucson for a while. That's why I was asking about Tucson earlier. And we were out of Davis Monthan where they have all the, all the A10s. And I was like, man, that would be a cool job. But again, it's one of those things where who knows if you're going to like it. Obviously the Army doesn't offer A10s, even though they should. But who knows if you're going to like it until you've had something even remotely on the path towards that, so a little bit different. So cool. You went through flight school. Obviously you wanted to go the rotary wing out. You got it. Something that I kind of saw that is a little bit different from most people that I don't know where it fell, whether it was also in flight school or outside of whatever it might be, but your MQ8 qual. How did that work for you? Was that something that you were additionally tagged with while you were down in flight school? Is it something that came after? How did that kind of work?
So it came after. The way it works with the Navy is the HSC squadrons, the squadrons that fly the MH-60 Sierra, they're separated into carrier-based squadrons. They deploy on the carriers, and then expeditionary-based squadrons who deploy in a number of different ships, LCS, LHD, amphibious assault ships, and then some land-based stuff as well. So they're the ones that man the MQ-8 as the air vehicle operator. So when I got to HSC 3, which is our RAG, where you actually get qualified in your fleet aircraft, that's where they identified that I was going to my expeditionary squadron and tagged me with the air vehicle operator qualification.
That's pretty awesome. It's just something that obviously we don't have in the Army that is pretty unique and is definitely cool. For the people who don't know, who are listening, the MQ-8 is basically, if you're an Army guy and we're around for the Kiowa, it's basically a Kiowa that's a UAV that's used as a scout platform. Really cool concept, really cool idea. It's a helicopter UAS, definitely a little bit different. I don't know the actual, I've seen pictures of it. I don't know the actual, relative size of it to a normal helicopter, but it looks pretty big in the pictures.
Yeah, so the MQ-8 Charlie is the newest variant, and I think the airframe is based off of Bell 206 or 207, so that's what it is.
Yeah, that's a pretty big UAS or
Yeah,
UAV. That's a pretty, it's basically it's an unmanned Kiowa. So look at that. The Army could have saved a lot of money just adopting something that existed in other places in the military. But no, that's super cool. And I definitely can appreciate where that probably played in later down the road when you moved into WTI realm, having a little bit of experience on the UAS side. We don't have to dive into the capabilities in terms of handoffs and its specific capabilities, but that's a later point. Kind of talking a little bit about your operational experience in the MH-60. Kind of, you talked about it being the Swiss Army knife of naval helicopters. What were some of those roles for you? Did it work? Does each squadron kind of have like their set tasks that like, cool, this squadron is kind of specializing in this area, this squadron specializes in this area, or is it kind of just very wide breadth, whatever you might be called upon to do?
So yeah, funny you mentioned that, because I feel like that's been an ongoing debate on how we should actually skin the squadrons is specialties. But no, the Navy asks a lot of our aircraft, so we're expected to be able to, execute this wide range of missions. But yeah, I enjoy it. It can be difficult at time to be good at a lot of things. But that's what the Navy has asked us to try and accomplish is maintain that proficiency in multiple mission sets.
You don't have to go into all of them, but just for our listeners who are maybe trying to weigh the Army versus Navy, what are some of those like most common mission sets that you find yourselves doing?
So yeah, logistics is definitely one of the biggest ones. We have the cabin that is able to accommodate a good amount of packs, mail, and cargo. Search and rescue is always one of the mission sets that we are proficient and able to execute. And combat search and rescue is one thing that we train to as well. Some of the ordnance that we can carry on board, kind of similar to the DAP, 60 that you guys do, but more bang. You got the Hellfire, the 20 Mike, and UGR rockets. But then we're also capable of carrying 50 cal and 7.62. So the reason we are able to carry those ordnance is to protect the ships underway and open ocean and the littorals as well.
That's pretty cool. Now, for instance, like most of us, the DAP is a very, very narrow, small community in the Army, right?
Yeah.
But for you guys, is that kind of like a separate qualification, or is it something that they say, hey, cool, we have this mission coming up, we're throwing wings and the weapon system on this aircraft, and you're going to go get signed off, qualified to do this, and that's what you're going to do? Or is that kind of like a very specific thing that people are very specifically trained on how to operate? I only ask specifically because I know for myself, like when we work with the 64, when we work with our Apache brethren or sisters, they're talking about stuff. And for me, not being a gun guy, I'm like, I'm just way over my head. Don't know what you're talking about. You're throwing out names, numbers, acronyms that I just don't even remotely know. And I know it's a whole separate kind of knowledge base from what the standard lift pilot has. So what does that look like? Or is that just kind of, again, in that realm that you guys are just expected to know?
No, definitely within the realm that we're expected to know. Not to say that MH-60 Sierra is any substitute for a DAP aircraft. Those guys are fantastic at what they do, and that aircraft is very capable. But to answer your question about who would do it, it's just a part of our qualification process. That would fall more into surface warfare, protecting the ship, or a core competency. So every pilot is going to get qualified in that. And then the more senior and more experienced junior officers are going to get qualified in special operations support, and then also combat search and rescue.
It's kind of interesting, and it actually leads to kind of a follow-up comment that I was going to make, that you mentioned like very specific qualifications on the mission set itself. Like in the Army, we have our aircrew training manual, and it has all these tasks of things that are tasks that are standard that we can get signed off on. Some units might do them, some might have some different ones that they do when it comes down to like your mission tasks. But the big thing that you guys seem to do differently is kind of the overall like career tracks and just how pilots are qualified, and not just qualified themselves, but qualified to train others. Like in the Army, we have instructor pilots and unit trainers who are pretty much your primary people who can sign off on a task itself. Like any pilot in command can go out, which is the equivalent of like your aircraft commander, can go out and they're like the primary trainer, but they can't sign off on a qualification for a task, right? So I found it interesting when we were talking with some others that you guys, specifically Justin, kind of explained it to me. And again, when he explained it, I was like, way over my head. It's such a different concept, because you guys will have like low level altitude tactics instructor, low level instructors, you'll have weapons instructors, you'll have all these very different things. And I feel like I'm more curious of your opinion. Like, do you think that works better, or do you think that it would work better to have a very generalized kind of just baseline instructor role that knows how to teach, is proficient, maybe a little bit more senior in all of those mission sets? Or do you find that it's better having those one or two people who are like, they are the low level instructor, they're the weapons instructor? Kind of like, what's your view on that?
So yeah, the low level instructor or the more senior instructors, that's definitely the weapons and tactics instructor. I would definitely like to see more people get qualified in that. We just don't have the time, funding, and billeting for that, because the training that I received in Fallon was fantastic. Learned a ton. The experience was great. But yeah, as far as qualifications and, teachers, teaching the teachers is essentially what we are doing. Level 3s, teaching level 3s. But we reserve as WTIs, we reserve the check rides. We do the final, like, yep, you qualify, you can teach the teacher type thing. So that's one way that we are able to make sure we're qualifying the right people. The right people are getting out there and passing the correct knowledge down the road,
Kind of backing up a little bit, only because I'm listening and again, wrapping my head around the difference in communities, right? So level 3s, is that like your equivalent of like a more senior pilot who has a bunch of qualifications or maybe all of the qualifications, but it's not a teacher?
So the way it's broken down is level 1 is going to be your co-pilot syllabus. So you're learning how to fight your aircraft in very vanilla terms, right? And then your level 2 is going to be your -2 qualification. You're able to be a good -2 aircraft commander. Whereas your level 3 is going to be your section lead, and you can take 2 aircraft and go execute the mission. Level 4 is going to be your most senior person. And then you receive level 4 outside of or from weapons and tactics instructor in Fallon, or you could receive it at the seawall as well, but it's more reserved for the 04 types if you're going to receive that qualification at the seawall. And then level 5 is going to be your resident at the weapons school, whether it is in Fallon or whether it's in San Diego or Norfolk, for specifically the MH-60 Sierra Bubas.
Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. So kind of to relate that a little bit more to, again, a lot of our listener base are Army pilots and things like that. So your guys' section lead is basically the equivalent of our air mission commander, who is over a serial or a group of aircraft that are operating a mission. They're in charge of that group of aircraft of 2 or more and whatever it might be. Sometimes you might have a serial commander, but they're usually still an AMC or air mission commander qualified person. And then obviously you guys don't use the instructor pilot true like term like we do, who the whole system's a little bit different. I don't know if you've ever sat down with an Army pilot and talked about what it looks like when you come out of flight school, but it's a very different process because you guys come out of flight school. Basically you're at that level 1, but you're immediately going into flying and learning your mission sets and getting that experience, where when we come out of flight school, you go into RL progression where you are learning the mission set, but you're flying with a more senior tracked instructor pilot who is training you on those very specific tasks. And then you go out and you fly with your pilots in command or regular aircraft commanders, and then you develop into that. So pretty much the same thing, just different names and a little bit different roles. Yeah. But it does kind of seem, at least from how you describe it, that everything in naval aviation, in terms of pilot progression and pilot experience, is kind of centered around weapons and tactics instructors at that senior level.
Yeah, the expectation is, well, as far as the weapons and tactics instructor progression is, post your first sea tour, you'll go to the school, and then you either are staff at Nautic or you go to a coastal weapons school. And then from after that tour, the expectation is you are a CAG staff, which is the carrier admiral. You're a part of his staff as the helicopter subject matter expert, or you go back to the fleet and you're a training officer because you've been working with the training instruction for so many years that you should be familiar with it and know how to execute it. But then also you're teaching the next generation of young aviators.
So without diving too deep into, I'll say, the high side of what truly a weapons and tactics instructor entails, kind of what is your primary role? Like if you could define like what your role is as a WTI, like what would that be?
I mean, in short, it's to teach. Like I'm always looking for my replacement. You're always trying to, train up your replacement. You're not going to be here forever. The Navy's always going to keep on grinding, even though you're not, or you move on to the, next biggest and baddest thing. So always teaching, imparting any type of wisdom that you got or you get along the way. I'm a firm believer that, the day you stop learning in the aircraft is the day you need to walk away. So you should always be learning, even if you are a senior instructor.
No, that's a great mindset to have just across the board. I think that if you have that mindset from day one and get into the role of saying, this is what I'm learning, but thinking down the road, like, okay, how do I process this information and how do I then turn around and eventually I'm going to have to teach it? And that's a big thing that in the Army, especially when we have newer PCs that are developing and we're going over stuff, I'm like, hey man, like when we talk about things, start immediately thinking like, okay, how do I take this information and pass that on? Because I think if you think about it in that light, it just one, it's going to help you retain it. And that's, I think, why we're really, in my opinion, I think we're really bad. We're really good at giving information, but we're really bad about, especially with junior guys, saying, okay, hey, teach me what we just went over in your own words. Think about it, however you're going to approach it. Teach that to me. So I think that that's really cool that that's where your focus is. I mean, I know obviously the name Weapons and Tactics Instructor kind of alludes to it, but are there specific focus areas that you guys evaluate and train people on? Or is it again just very broad across all of those mission sets that you guys participate in?
It is across the variety of mission sets, but we do at the weapons school break down what our subject matter expert areas are, which allows us to dive a little bit deeper into those mission sets. Like specifically mine is special operations support. So I have all this, the networking with naval special warfare, with the Marines and stuff like that. So I'm able to be plugged in a little bit more in that mission set, vice my counterpart being, combat search and rescue or close air support. So everyone kind of has their own little niche at the weapons school. Which is it's nice. You dig a little bit deeper, you learn a little bit more, but the expectation is that you are still a well-rounded instructor.
I think that's a very unique way. And I'm sure Spencer and I are kind of on the same page just because it is very foreign from how the Army just operates in general. I mean, we do have AMSOs, which is our aviation mission survivability officer. And our primary focus is teaching people how to operate in a near peer environment and how to use our systems, how to use our tactics and that kind of thing. And eventually the Army is coming out with a tactics instructor course. And that's the big push. And what that looks like, I don't think any of us truly know, but their goal is to kind of shift more towards pretty much what the Navy seems to be using and pretty much what the Air Force is also using uh, in terms of how they teach people in specific focus areas. And they're like, cool, you're an expert in this area, and that is what you're going to teach people on is this one area. But I think our biggest issue is likely the same thing that you guys have, is that you wear a lot of hats. I know a lot of people, especially warrant officers in the Army, we have a tendency to bitch, and I'll be the first person to say it, especially when you don't have that specialty track yet, and you're that untracked PI or untracked PC, and you're tasked with being the unit movement officer dealing with containers, and you're tasked with being the night vision goggle custodian, and you're tasked with all these things, and they're like, oh well, the Air Force doesn't do this or the Navy doesn't do this, and I don't think they fully realize that. No, they might not have those titles or necessarily have those duties, but they still have that wide breadth of responsibility that is still very busy. It's a different, the grass isn't always great. It's just different grass,
It is.
I don't think,
grass,
that's fully respected.
Yeah, definitely different grass.
So on that note, when you were kind of a little bit of a backtrack, when you were that junior pilot, what did a typical day look like for you as that junior naval aviator out of flight school in the fleet? You're out there young and, well, not as young as maybe some others, but still young and unafraid.
Yeah. Funny you mentioned that. That's actually how I got my call sign. So yeah, Navy was not new to me. Going into my first sea tour as a junior officer, as a, Lieutenant J.G. O'Brien. But, I checked in, responsibilities are low, get qualified, get your sign-offs, that's all that's really expected of you right now. You don't necessarily have a ground job. So I was like, okay, I can do that. And then another JG, more senior JG. So he's been at the command for probably 5 months or so. Obviously knows his way around the command and the ins and outs and everything, has his first qualification or so. And he's like, hey man, look, if you don't have anything to do, just go home. Come here, do your work, and then just leave. I was like, done. Okay. So I show up first thing in the morning, I get all my work done, and then I take an extended lunch every day. And what's even more fitting to the call sign. So when we get our call sign, it's called a mess night. When the wardroom gets together, you share stories, you propose different call signs. I was actually in Mexico for a wedding when I got my call sign. So yeah, Casper was very fitting. The way they explained it was, that new guy, what's his name again? Casey? Yeah, he's a really nice guy, but he's just never fucking around. Yeah, his call sign's Casper. And then, it was just so fitting because I wasn't even at the mess night when I received my call sign. So I was like, all right, thanks, guys. I don't know. I've heard worse, so I'll take Casper every day.
Well, I don't know if you know, Sasso, F-18 pilot, but his is Lou, and it was because Lou Sasso sounds like loose asshole. So I think yours is pretty vanilla in terms of the overall harshness behind it. But on that note, you would have made a great warrant officer, as FYI, because we're experts in accomplishing our task for the day and being elsewhere. But no, that's awesome, man. And I know for all of those people listening, understand the nature of specific job roles in aviation a lot of times precludes people from really diving deep into subject areas, both on our side and our guest side. So understand, if you want to learn a lot about WTI, go Google the ins and outs of what WTI is and MOTS is and all that. And you can find a lot of great information. But it's not exactly stuff that we're going to dive into on here and disclose on here, because again, people are still in and doing the job. And there's just a lot of stuff that we can't necessarily directly put ourselves in relation with. And it's not that we're trying to elude or direct information elsewhere. It's just that it's the nature of the beast. And I'm sure that most people can understand that. But Casey, you've got a pretty incredible story. Just looking at from the start of your career to where you are now, in less than 10 years from when you began your military career, here you are at that senior level, not even just as a pilot, but from going from rescue swimmer all the way, about a little bit more than 10 years now, I guess, roughly. But, I'll say less than 10 years as a pilot, you've progressed to a very senior level. It's obvious you're a hard charger, and it's been really cool to kind of sit down and hear your story and your experiences with that. So it's definitely different, and it's a lot for us to wrap our minds around, just because the Navy is such a different culture and way of operating and way of teaching and everything. But it's very relatable in terms of all the things that you're asked to do and be proficient in, because it is a lot and it can be super overwhelming at times, but it is really cool to see you out there and see you killing it, man.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Something that we pretty much always do. And I think you'll have a unique perspective on now that, you are a weapons and tactics instructor. You've seen a lot of things out there. You've been out in the operational Navy. But aside from that, being in special operations, I'm sure you've done a lot of joint exercises. I know you said, you've worked with some different branches, and across all of them, if you could give any aspiring aviator who wants to join the military some advice, what would that be?
I think you hit the nail on the head. The grass is just a different shade. Everybody does things differently. I've been fortunate enough to see how the Air Force operates. I've participated in Red Flags and Nellis. I've observed their weapons and tactics instructor school. I've also observed MOTS, the Marine Weapons and Tactics Instructor course. I mean, the best thing you can do is just try and connect with the people that are in the job and ask the questions to figure out where you fit. Because everybody does something a little bit different. I absolutely love what I do. I wouldn't change it, in a second. But it just fits me. It fits my personality.
That's awesome. Spence, do you have anything?
No, sir.
Casey, it has been it's been a real honor to have you on, man. I know we linked up on Instagram because I just kept seeing your content, and I was like, man, this guy's got some really cool stuff. I don't know what he does. I don't know his story, but he shares some dope stuff. We're gonna have him on, and I'm really glad that we did, because it's always cool to see. I very much, especially when I look and see what Brett posts with Brotallion and just the work that people do in their corners of the community that we're building, across whatever, different area. It's really interesting because all of us express ourselves through those posts and through, what we put out there. And I think it's cool, especially you, because you're very quiet. You don't put anything about yourself. You just post the content, of what you guys are doing in the mission and building up that community in your own way. And I think that's really, really cool and awesome to put a face and a name and a story, with that content. And I think it's really cool to sit back and be like, this is dope content, but like, you should go listen to that podcast that guy talks. He was a freaking rescue swimmer and doing all this cool shit. So no, Casey, it's been a really cool experience to have you on, man.
Yeah, it's been a hell of a journey. Thanks for giving me the platform to be able to, share the story. I'm humbled to be asked to be on the podcast. Thanks, guys.
No, man. Thank you.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you.